Okay, welcome back. We are going to cover uh, a couple of things, namely that it may be a situation where you don't have another player, even if it's an international wargaming broadcast or something on the internet. Uh, you may have a player in a different location, and they have to submit their orders about where to move units. That is like one universe. Um, Before you even get to that point, however, the nuances of playing a game where the items, the units are visible uh, to all players. They're on the game table. And that is completely the opposite of what would actually be happening in an actual setting of a conflict. The commanders only know where the opponent is based on the information that they're receiving from their scouts and couriers and other commanders and such. So when you have a miniature game, you've got all the pieces visible, because if you make them invisible, then that means you're playing on a map or in some way that prevents the other opponent from seeing what you've got. That's kind of a luxury. That takes, you would end up having to have a map for each player, and they would make their moves on the map. And then when something becomes visible because you're in range or sight or it fires or something of that nature, then you would put it on the game table. But failing that kind of situation, the fog of war concepts, there are several different ways of doing it. Let's assume for the moment that you don't have that luxury of map moving until something is shown or known or discovered. So all the pieces are on the game table like we see right now. And so if you're playing a solo game, just yourself, you're setting up a scenario, you want to see how things can develop, then you have to think of ways in which to make it or pull the player out of it, because there's like no player. This is a situation where you're playing without actually having the person, me for instance, making a decision. The way to do that would be to make choices. So when you've got your troops in position, and by the way, this is an angle that we're looking at here, courtesy of the GoPro that's right here. You've got your troops in position, you've got your things, basically, maybe you just randomly put them out there. Maybe they weren't put out there with any particular, idea. The two forces are just entering as you see them. And you're trying to decide, well, how do I know where someone's going to go? Well, when you look at the situation, you kind of have a variety of possible locations and values. Like, for instance, let's look at the Confederate troops right now. They have in their immediate vicinity forested area. Basically, they own it now. There's no reason to debate or to decide if they go in any of the stuff that they're at, because they're already at it. This field, for instance, why, you have to ask the question, why would the commander put any troops in there? Well, because it's like maybe a fallback position. So that's one question. So the question would be, oh, well, so much for the GoPro. Um, the question would be, does he have the wherewithal to make a reserve and put it somewhere? So that's a yes or a no. If the answer is no, then he is not going to put any troops in a back area for a reserve. He's going to use all his forces. So that's one thing. And then there's the other thing about disbursement. How does he disperse his troops? You want to believe that they're going to stay together, but again, you don't know that for certain. Maybe he is going to decide, you know what, I'm going to spread them out. So that would be another question. Does he spread them out or not? Yes or no? it's kind of like a rudimentary in a sense, because you're trying to figure out, without putting the player there, without me making the decision for both units, for both forces, what's the commander going to do? What are his options? So when you look at the Confederate position, the options are that he can move down the road. Let's look at them basically for what they are. He can move down the road with his entire force, yes or no, or just a portion of his force. So he either moves with his whole force or just a portion, and then you decide, okay, say you're using a die roll. If the die roll says he's going to move down the road, and the next question is with how much, and the answer is half of it, then half of his troops move down the road. Okay, so what happens to the other half? That's another question. So these questions have to be asked and answered in every situation. You don't have to do it perpetually, but at least you get some idea of how to start. And the same thing happens for the Union forces. Does he advance down the road with his whole force, or just part of it? And then how much of the part? Half of it? And then look at the other places that the commander can put his troops at. And then before any of this begins, you always have to understand what the objective is. Let's just say very simply, like in a lot of games, the objective is just to destroy the enemy, right? To cause as much damage as possible. There's no particular piece of terrain that's more valuable than the other. There's no bridge to be taken. There's no major hill or some other objective like that, or some terrain element to be taken. The objective is just to fight, just to get the other guy and cause damage. So what's the best way to cause damage? You know, get your troops up there and prepare to shoot as quickly as possible. You don't want to take too much time, right, doing it. So you look at let's go back to the possibilities for where to move the troops. And then there's the question always, okay, where is he going to move some portion of it, and to what thing? Okay, so it's how much and where. So going down the road is one thing, and then how much of that happens. Going into this field, and then how much, and going into this field and how much. Going into the open area on this far on his side, left flank, maybe taking this field, which is basically, we know it's fenced, but it could be any kind of cover. It could be a stone wall, but at any rate, it's a bordered field. And the troops could do relatively good protection. Okay, so again, it's where and by how much. And eventually you may run out of troops, because if you keep answering these questions with how much you're going to move, you're going to run out of forces. You could also, then again, you could also say each one of these things is going to be resolved with one regiment. So he's got 4 regiments plus a battery of artillery. So in each of these things, you could say he's going to move 1. Okay, so he's going to move 1 down the road. If it turns out to be the road, it's going to be 1 to this field, 1 to this field, 1 to the over here on the left, and we actually will probably move that artillery, because having it sitting over it only has one objective, or potential location. I shouldn't say objective. A potential location for it to go would be on top of the hill, because it's not going to go in the forest. You can't do any good there. It could maybe not go anywhere and sit there and wait, but then it won't be useful. So the answer is pretty obvious, probably top of the hill. So the answer, or the question, would be when it's a kind of a foregone conclusion based on the terrain only. So gun moves to the top of the hill, sets down, yes or no. Maybe it doesn't set down. Maybe it moves to the top of the hill but doesn't set down because it's going to keep moving. Okay, that way we don't make the decision. The decision is kind of made for us. So these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. So when you think about it, if we start rolling, we'll use die roll because it's the best, fastest thing to do. We'll die roll on the commander's command valuation system, the CVS numbers. And those can be used in a variety of ways. Remember, it's combat, it used to be called morale. Now it's communication range. So combat, morale, communication range, tactical aggressiveness, and initiative. So a tactical value would be rolled against to see how he disperses troops, where he places them, and so on. So initiative is one thing, but the tactical value allows him a flexibility to move things around. So you would begin the game, as always, or the turn, by rolling for initiative. Okay, so let's assume who gets the jump on the other guy, who moves best, fastest before the other person. And forget about aggressiveness, because that's a different story. So let's say the Confederates have won the initiative, and they're going to move before the Union does. So they're going to move first, and then the Union's going to move, if you play the game that way. If it's I go, you go situation, then the Confederates would move, and after they're done, then the enemy would move, the Union would move. Otherwise, if you're playing a situation where it's simultaneous, then that means you got to be careful about how you arrange that, how you adjudicate it, how you organize it. Maybe it is only true, or maybe it is true that only one regiment moves. Each player moves one, and then they move another one, and then they continue like that at the same time moving until all the forces have moved. That's one way of playing the game. Otherwise, the I go, you go has nuances that may or may not be to the liking of the players. It may be completely unrealistic to do such a thing. Who knows? But generally, it's a way of doing it that isn't always the best, but it's the fastest. So the Confederates have won the initiative and they're going to move, and then you would roll to see what, okay, they move here, here, or they send troops in an anticipation of moving this direction. So we would roll dice to see how far which of the locations the troops have moved to. So you would number them, because that's the best way to do it. There's a forest here. I don't know if that's a realistic objective or a place, a location. I keep saying objective. It's not really an objective. Is that a legitimate location to put troops? Yeah, I suppose. It's got no troops in it now. And then that begs the question, how often do you keep doing this? How many times do you do this? Well, you kind of do it every turn, in a sense, so that the player isn't involved. Me being the only person, I'm just observing. Let's let the thing go the way it's going to go by itself. So we would roll to see the first unit, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, let's do it this way. 1, 2 is this field. 3, 4 is the road, and 5, 6 would be this field here. And that, how did I arrive at those numbers? Just arbitrary. But you could use more science by saying, well, what's the more likely thing that's going to happen there? The road, right? Because the road is the fastest thing. The troops move the fastest on the road. And if he wants to get his troops to attack the enemy, then using the road is one thing. But remember, when you're moving down a road, you have to start and end on the road to get that bonus. So if a unit is moving 3 across country, it's going to move 4 and 5 on a road, plus 2 hexes on a road. So it has to stay on the road, begin and end on the road. So what's more likely? That's kind of a hard thing to decide. What's the more likely that he would do? Can't really say, right? Well, what is the more likely thing? Would it be down the road or into the field? Maybe the entire force is not going to be here at all. It's going to move completely over to the right because he sees some advantage of getting into this area. Maybe this is too congested and he can't be effective. So these are a lot of questions that in order for you to do a solo game, you have to ask. It's not that it's difficult. You just got to decide what the priorities are. If they're all equal priorities, then it's simple. Like I said earlier, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and use an 8-sided die, 7, 8, right? So, but how many? Okay, like we said before, we're going to just do it on one unit at a time. So, using our dice on the phone, Dice, 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 dice. Okay. Let's choose a die. We said there was potential for 8 or 1, 2, 3, 4 locations. We want to make them equal. You could just do 1 through 4 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So again, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's do a D4. D3. Let's do a D4. Okay. So first unit, again, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1 goes in the field, right? And then we ask ourselves, well, how fast? Full speed or half speed? So it's even odd. So let's just use we'll just use a D6. So even is half speed, and odd is full speed. So odd is full speed. So from where they were, they moved their full 3 hex move. So 1, 2, and 3. It's that simple. Well, relatively speaking, anyway. Let's just do the next guy, right? 1, 2, 3, and 4. One. So he goes forward, and then the question is, how fast? Full speed. So this guy goes the same, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Continue. Next guy. So that was 1, 2, and 3. He's going to go this direction. And then the question is, how fast? Half speed. So he's going to go cross country. Instead of 3, he just goes basically 1. Okay. And then the last guy, who's not on the road, he goes the same direction. So he's going to go to the open, and then there's this to the left, and then there's the question of speed, and he goes half speed. So he's only going to move 1 as well. Now let's do the, well, we know there's only one conclusion for the artillery, so let's just roll for how fast. Okay, so half speed. So instead of 3, he's going to move just 1. Okay, we'll just actually, you know what, we'll use the limber to show that's where the gun is located. Okay, so there we are. The Confederates have moved. I didn't have anything to do with it. It was completely random. Does it make sense to do that? Probably not. But the fact is, I had nothing to do with it. It was completely random to what they were going to do. And now you ask the question, well, wait a minute. Okay, let's assume that that was the first thing to do. And that kind of dictates what their objective is in a sense, right? This part of the force is going to head this direction. So do we need to roll for it again? Well, that's a good question, right? Once you've decided their direction, how long do they keep doing that? And so that's like deciding on the game table what the waypoints are. For instance, when they reach, you could have said at any point in the movement, when they reach the next decision point, which would be getting to like this area right here, do they go into this field, they go into the gap, they go on the hill, or they go into this field? So when they get to a certain degree, a certain location where another decision kind of needs to be made, then you make the roll again. Up until that point, they're going to continue going in the direction that they started. Now, the CVS values are going to be able to countermand that situation, because something might happen that the player or the non-player character is going to say, wait a minute, That's not actually a good idea. I want to try and stop that from happening. So then you would roll on their tactical ability, the value. And if you fail it, they continue. If you pass it, then they can do what the non-player character or the judge in this case or some other method to decide where they actually do go. So you can see that it can be as complicated or as easy as you want it to be, whatever suits your, how you feel it should be done. Again, with the Union, same thing. We have getting across the river is one by starting in this field and then going down the road, going to the right to then navigate through this area, and then going into this field and this artillery piece, which is right here. Does he stay there or does he move? Is there some place for him to go? Maybe they decide to move into this field, that kind of situation. So let's do, again, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they would go, the first unit would go this direction, down the road, into the field, or this direction. So they've decided to go not down the road, we'll say. And then the speed. A half speed. So they move only 1 hex. Let's get our forest out of the way. Put these guys in there. They're going this direction. They're not going in the field. They're going fully to the right. Okay, next one. Same thing. How fast and which direction? So the direction is the same and the speed is the same. So this guy is also going to follow that guy. The third unit, he's going to go in the third choice, which is 1, 2, and 3 here, and the speed is 1 hex. So his direction is this direction, and his speed is 1 at this point. Then we will continue to do that until he gets there. And that's kind of like what I was talking about. So now when he gets there, what does he do then? And that's when another decision point or another question is raised. Okay, so I guess we're almost at, this guy here. Is he going to stay there? Or, let's see, stay, move, or move here. So 1, 2, and 3. He stays put, and speed isn't needed. No. I read that incorrectly. He is actually going to go, moving from this position at full speed. So, from where he was, he's already limbered. He's now moving, because the choices were 1 and 2, and, 1 is not moving, 2 is moving, and then 3, I said that incorrectly. 1 is not moving, 2 is this direction, and 3 is this direction. And he moved, the direction indicated was forward, at the speed of full, right? So he goes 1, 2, and 3. So he goes flying down this area between the marshland there. And there we go. That is an example of something being completely out of my control, so long as you can understand how you can number the items and the locations and such to move in, and then you continue playing it that way. So this is interesting, right? I don't have to do much thinking. I'm just doing kind of a random, massaged kind of a random. It's not completely random because there are some, logical things that you have to see what's possible on the game table. So there we are.